As I mentioned, I'm Brian Johnson. I mentioned I graduated in 2021. I went through the IDT program, and I got to tell you, this was my favorite class to take overall. And let me just start by saying that I'm really glad that you're here tonight. What we're going to do is just provide a little bit of an overview for the course. During our course, we will plan to have a session like this every Tuesday night throughout the 7 weeks. And we're going to look at just kind of a course overview. We're also going to look at just kind of a broad brushstroke of some things about visual design principles that we'll be talking about in this class. Also look a little bit about some of the course policies and just some of the assignments that you'll be doing. And I always like to finish it up with a little bit of time for us to just ask questions about the upcoming assignments that are coming through. That's where we'll end up for tonight here. All right, welcome, Rachel. And so let's just look at our goals real quick here. We are going to take just a moment to go over just a little bit about the course direction, some policies, as I mentioned, some overview. Then we're going to start off with some design decisions as well. And I grew up in Chicago, so I'm a really big Chicago Cubs fan. Any Cardinal fans in the class or in the session tonight? Cardinals fans? Okay, all right, that's okay. That's okay.
Not that's okay.
Yeah, I think now we got Bellinger back, and maybe an okay season for the Cubbies here for tonight on us. So we'll see. Let's see. I mean, it's hope springs eternal in Chicago. So I guess we're going to start actually with a soccer image tonight. I played college soccer a long time ago, and I love that game almost as much as I love the Cubs. We'll get to that here in just a moment. I do want to take you out to just a couple things about the course as far by way of an overview. Change up here. But I'm not going to walk you through the whole syllabus for tonight, but just want to provide you a little bit with some details here. Let me kick back to the syllabus. This is really a quick course. It's kind of a sprint race. As I mentioned, we are going to have a meeting like this every week. And one thing I found even when I was going through my doctoral program is, online courses are hard sometimes, and just being able to make that connection with people face to face is really a powerful thing. If you're familiar with Garrison's work about the community of inquiry framework, he talks a little bit about that there's the teaching presence and there's also the cognitive presence, and that's more sort of on the academic side. But then there's also just the sort of the human presence of being even in an asynchronous class, having meetings like this. And I think that's some powerful opportunities for us to learn and for us to learn together. Just a couple of things to go over with you in here. APA 7 is the expectation. You've probably seen that in your other classes. One thing that is a little bit different about this class, and I want to just clarify that here. Turn off my printer here. Okay. I'm a librarian by trade, and actually we just got done with parent-teacher conference, so I kind of ran home, so I'm maybe a little scattered tonight with that. But you always want to cite your sources for your material that you're using. We do have 3 assignments in this course. We'll talk a little bit about the visual critique tonight later on as we finish up. You also have an infographic assignment. We won't talk a whole lot about assignments 2 and 3 right now, just because they're a couple weeks off. I will tell you this too, something just out of my own experience going through the doctoral program. I'm glad to have a quick Zoom call with you at any time if you need some clarification, even after the meeting, or maybe you spend some time mulling things over tonight after me. Say, hey, wait a minute, Dr. J, I still don't quite get this, or can we talk through? Can we kind of work through this idea some more? I'm glad to do those with you, or just communicate with you via email. Try to get back to you within 48 hours. I want to go down to this section here in the syllabus, just talking about generative AI. Something that's a little bit different about this class than the University of Memphis policy is that for your image creation, because this is a message design class, we're talking about how can we speak through images, or how can we communicate with our viewers through images and text and other sources. You are allowed to use generative AI for your assignments for the image parts. So we'll talk more about your first assignment later tonight, but with the visual critique, we're actually asking you to develop some prompts that you'll feed into a generative AI source to generate you some images, and then to adjust those images and discuss some things about how it changes the message of those images. But generative AI, just to be clear, is only to be used for the image parts of this class. And anytime you use it, there's a link in in here that kind of goes into, well, how do I cite the use of generative AI for images? Make sure that you do that. Also, just really to be clear about the written part, when you're doing your written reflections, that needs to be all of your own work, and generative AI should not be used for written work. So I just want to kind of make that clear for you. Have you guys used generative AI in any of your other classes so far, as far as the image generation or maybe some of the other features? Okay, no. Okay, so we've got some good tools for you in there. We did have a lot of reading tonight, so one of the other things we're going to do here in just a moment is we're going to make a little bit of a graphic organizer, just kind of organize how do all of these different moving parts across all of these articles and videos, how do they fit together under the topic of visual design and crafting a message. But does anyone have any questions about the syllabus? I know we went through that pretty quickly here in there, and there's some really great tools to use, and we'll kind of introduce you to those a little bit tonight. In fact, I'm going to go back to the tools here.
Do we need to go ahead and order the textbook?
I would. It is also available as an e-copy through EBSCOhost. You can get to it on the Memphis Library. And the white space is not my enemy one. It's a pretty fantastic. I mean, it's a textbook, but for being a textbook, it's pretty engaging. Sometimes textbooks are a little bit dry, but yeah, I would, because I think in module 2 you do have some readings in there. I think it's chapters 1 and 2, if I remember right there. You also get some points for discussion posts or discussion boards in here. I really like what I've seen so far on the discussion board. Just a reminder for the expectations. Every week you're gonna post, and I encourage you to post early. I know that we're all busy people. We've got families and work obligations and other things going on, but do really encourage you to post early. And usually the first part of your discussion post, which is your initial post, is due by Thursday. And then you need to respond to 2 of your peers in some depth, and more than just, hey, great post, or hey, I like what you said. Maybe there's a part of something that they said that I really agree with what you said here about the way this image helped to craft the design, but we kind of diverge in our opinions about this part. And certainly with civility, we want to do that, but that's part of what keeps the discussion going. Part of my responsibility as your instructor this term is just, I'll be pretty active on the discussion posts as well. Do remember just to cite your sources, the sources with APA 7 in there too, for those posts as well. But that's kind of the format. And one of the other expectations for discussion posts is that you respond to 2 of your peers on different days. So maybe if your initial post is due by Thursday, maybe you choose Friday to do one of your peers' posts and respond to it, and then maybe you hit one on Saturday or Sunday. And all the work in this class is due by 11:59 on Sunday nights. I think probably similar to the other classes too. About the Dropbox. That 11:59 comes really fast. When I was going through the program, I tended to kind of work right up to the last minute, and those last about 10 minutes before midnight are about the fastest minute of the day. So do be a little cautious about that, just to meet those deadlines. So let's go back, and I'm going to start with a little. I call it football. Sometimes you ever hear me call it football, I mean to say soccer. Let me go back into our slideshow here. And then we're going to go from there. We're going to do a little design decision mini activity on the front end with some discussion and interaction. Then we're going to talk about visual literacy and kind of define it. We're also going to talk briefly about our role as instructional designers to craft a message. And then we're going to finish up with another image evaluation, so talk about your upcoming assignment that's due at the end of week 2. So this is the first one, and as I mentioned, I'm a big footballer. I love this game. So does anybody recognize the person in the middle here? Have you seen that guy before? The guy wearing the black. I guess he's wearing kind of a cape.
That Messi?
That's Messi. Yeah, Messi. Who depending on who you are, you think it's Ronaldo, or you think it's Messi, is probably the greatest player in the world right now, even though he's pretty old for a footballer. I think he's 36 now, and he's playing actually in the United States. But this is from when Argentina won the World Cup in 2022. They did that Winter World Cup, which was a little different. Usually it's a summertime tournament, but it's so blazing hot in Qatar that they had to move it. So what catches your eye about this particular newspaper cover?
It matches their jersey colors.
Okay, it does. Yeah,
the titles.
yeah, they did. They've kind of got your eye wandering a little bit. You know, the name of the newspaper's up at the top, and I believe this is a South American newspaper. I'm assuming it's an Argentine one from Argentina. Yeah, they did kind of go match with the uniforms to bring the design. And the title of the newspaper and also the title of the article, it's almost like a sandwich around the image. So it really kind of draws your eyes centrally. Anything else just stand out? We're doing this one fairly quickly. But anything else stand out to you about this particular image? So we're going to look at a second one in just a second, for just a moment here.
I like the difference in I would say the color text actually. So the Campeones and the Del Mundo being two different for it to show the contrast of it still being on the picture itself versus below the picture, just for the sake.
Excellent. And yeah, it definitely helps to pop a little bit in the design.
Clarity.
Yeah, and I really on purpose.
I feel like it is somehow drawing me to. Oh,
Go ahead. I think I missed the last part of your comment there.
sorry, my internet was telling me that I'm unstable. Was I okay? Could you hear me all right?
I think you were starting to tell. I think you were in the middle of another thought about the image
Okay.
itself.
So with the image itself, I would say to make sure that so the image itself and the words are both equally important and that they have a decent balance. And the way that I see that is through the difference in at least just the color text of seeing that we still want to make sure that champions is the main thing that is in white. It is the one thing that we have. And then below that, we still have, yes, to make sure that it can be seen, but of the world, to have that even on two separate lines to show the way that it is, because typically that the phrase itself, knowing Spanish, the phrase itself is usually on a singular line. So I was like, the fact that they did make it distinct is almost as like they put two periods behind three different words.
Yeah, great point. Do you think that there's any other significance to where they put the words in? I intentionally chose one in Spanish, in case you mentioned you're fluent in Spanish. I'm trying to learn. I'm doing. I think I'm on like a 70-day streak on Duolingo because I'm a school librarian by trade, and so a lot of my students are speak Spanish as their first language. So I'm trying, but I intentionally chose a picture from a language different than English because I really wanted us to hone in on the picture itself. But those are some really great assertions. I'm curious. The phrase at the bottom, "Del Mundo," that'd be of the world. Is that right, Anna? Is that
Yes.
here?
So it's just saying that they're world champions. But typically, Campeones del Mundo is usually like a one sentence. It's never really. I don't usually see it separated.
Okay. Do you think it's interesting about where they put the team in relation to the? What do you notice about that? About where the team photo is in relation to that phrase? Like, is there sort of a visual metaphor about what's happening there? Maybe some visual design, maybe something even deeper there.
Other
You
than
said
Messi being the oh, go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
I was gonna say other than Messi being the only one in the Cape, that's as far as like the contrast of within the team.
Did you say the second part of that phrase was the world?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So that's like they're on top of the world is how I'm kind of looking at that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's something that I caught too. They're literally they've almost separated themselves. They are above the world. Certainly they're world champions, but there's also sort of a visual metaphor of the team is literally above the world. So I think it's some interesting visual design. Anybody have another thought about this one? Real quick,
I was gonna ask about the image. Have they kind of desaturated the crowd behind them?
yes.
Because it looks like the background is kind of desaturated, so they stand out a little bit more. And then if you rule of thirds the photograph, the focus is really drawn into the championship cup.
Yes, it is. It definitely draws our eyes there. But I think you're right that they did sort of gray out the background. I like that you mentioned the rule of thirds too. That's one of the principles that you'll see in our white space book too. That's kind of divided. You've got the El Dia the photo, and then you've also got the words at the bottom. So here's a second image. This is some great discussion. This is exactly what I was hoping would happen tonight. So great stuff so far. This is from another newspaper cover, same topic. Argentina wins the World Cup. And how is this one different? Or what catches your eye? You know, are there some visual metaphors here? Maybe what are some of the design decisions that the photographer made in the one on the right hand side there?
The first thing that came to my mind was that the first thing would be that there's only one player that I can see right away versus the entire team. And instead of the entire team, I see the fans. And so to me, the metaphor might be that the fans get to be a part of the experience, or this is an experience for the fans, and or a moment for the fans, maybe just as much as it might be for the teammates.
Okay. Yeah, the fans, it's hard to tell. The one guy down here, kind of in the bottom right, looks like he might be a part of the team, or maybe he's just a fan who's got the jersey. I'm not sure. But that's a great point there.
I feel like it affects the message that they're trying to have. The first example, like I believe Rebecca, yes, may have mentioned being above the world versus the second one. It more so kind of plays into the idea of Messi and how he is on like at the top of it or at the peak of his game right now and the peak of his season, and how it's centralized more so on him and the championship versus the team as a whole.
Okay. Yeah, there's definitely a different focus.
Yeah.
You know, sort of if we were going to maybe subtitle the picture on the left, you might say, you know, the Argentine team versus Messi. It's definitely more Messi focused. I still haven't really figured out what he's wearing in the left-hand picture. I don't know if that's a cape or I went back and looked at several covers. I'm not still real sure there, but is there any metaphor? You know, we mentioned this is kind of, you know, in the left-hand side, there was kind of a visual metaphor of, you know, literally the team above the world or on top of the world. Is there a visual metaphor in the right-hand one, or what might be some of the visual metaphors that we see there?
The way that he's kind of above, I mean, I guess if we consider that to be the fans, or even if we consider it to be the team, it's something where it looks like they're lifting him up. So he's, you know, he's at a peak, at a height in his career, um, and that maybe he's being lifted up, you know, metaphorically by the fans, by his team. Um, that, you know, it's kind of his victory, or he's the focus of it.
Okay. Yeah, they definitely put him very, very central to the picture. I almost look at this and almost, I guess this sort of recalls to me like some of the, you know, the statues of Greek gods and Roman gods. You know, it's almost like he's sort of deified just in even his pose in here. This has been some really good, just quick discussion about, you know, there's design decisions that people make. You know, what am I going to focus on? Where am I going to put the text? Where am I going to put the image? What aspects of the image am I going to bring out? You know, mentioned in the left hand one, there's just a lot of the audience is really great out. It's like they're secondary. And the second one maybe focuses on the fans, except for maybe this guy. We don't know about him, but it's almost more the fans than the team themselves there. So
I
really
think I
good.
have basketball in the brain, and like the
Yeah.
recent controversy of fans rushing from the stands and players getting injured and whether or not they're going to ban that. So I think I just had that like on my brain when I first
Yeah.
saw this, because the stands in the background are empty. But maybe that's not a soccer thing or a football thing that they rush onto the field after the game.
I think they do. Sometimes it depends on, you know, the soccer traditions might be a little bit different. Yeah, it's a little scary what's going on in the basketball world right now with that for sure, though, Morgan. Great point. What we're going to do next for the next few minutes is we're gonna walk through we're going to do a little bit of a graphic organizer. We're going to talk about visual literacy, which is our big focus in the class. And this diagram, I'm going to go out to it. We're going to create this together. And I really don't know how this is going to turn out. So this is kind of a collective document, and I'll share this with you at the end. But when you think about visual literacy, if we're going to start in the middle, well, first of all, before we begin, one thing that I did, part of our design job as visual designers or instructional designers and using visuals is that sometimes we need to put little cues in for our audience. So up here, you can see I've got on the right hand side, we've got topics, got the elements of visual literacy in the orange there, theories, and then we're going to talk about what our roles are as instructional designers here as well. So let's just start out by, we're going to kind of work our way from the inside out here. So maybe based on your readings, or maybe your own personal definitions as well, your personal takes and inputs here. So what is visual literacy, or what are some of the things that fall under visual literacy?
Part of it is the ability to encode, interpret, and to base a action or decision off of a symbol or a sign.
Okay. So based on a visual?
Yes, based on a
Okay.
visual.
On a visual. Okay. All right. So it sounds like there's kind of three aspects to this. Okay, what else if we're talking about the definition of visual literacy? There's the video to watch this week, and I know there's a lot of text. It was pretty text heavy this week in our content, but what are some other things maybe that we don't have in our definition? Or maybe say, visual literacy isn't visual literacy without this or without that.
There's the breakdown between the presenter and the receiver, and then also kind of the overarching theoretical framework.
Okay. Yes, and we are going to talk a little bit about theory. I'm really glad you mentioned theory in there as well. It's based in theory. Okay, yeah, we can't just like sort of throw images up there and call it good, right? There's a little more to it than that. Okay.
Could I add a small portion or
Yeah,
a small
yeah. Let's keep going. Absolutely.
So not only the ability to interpret them, but also to craft them. Because in order to be literate, you have to understand, internalize, and then also communicate back. So.
Okay. All right. Interprets.
I don't know where to put it, but.
Yeah, I'm gonna squeeze it. The one thing I don't. This is Lucid Chart. I don't know if you've used Lucid Chart. And there's a ton of these different apps out there. This one, it doesn't really do very well with spaces. So let's see if I can make these a little bit more distinct. I think I might be able to space this a little bit better based on theory. All right, so we've got some pretty good thoughts here. Anybody have anything else that maybe stood out to you? Say, oh wait, that we need to throw that in there. Could I add one, and more as a discussion post to just kind of push this along? What about, see if I can skip to the next line here. Let's see if it'll let me do this here. How is visual literacy contextual? Or what might be some of the contextual factors we have to consider as designers of visuals as we're crafting an image to present a message?
I don't know if this is too deep, but building off of what Amy said, bringing in some of cognitive load theory and thinking about prior knowledge and building off of schema that the learner already has, and how the learner is going to make connections with the visuals or symbols that are represented in the image with their own knowledge or experiences.
No, Morgan, I think that's great. You know, we have to, you know, as we design, we have to keep the learner in mind. Because there's definitely the learner or learners. You know, one thing I learned, my wife's an elementary teacher, and so I think, are any of you elementary teachers? Anybody teach elementary school? Or have experience doing that? I think elementary teachers are simply amazing. I think
I
kindergarten.
taught high school.
It's a high school. Okay, yeah, I work with 8th and 9th graders, so it's kind of in between.
Yeah.
But in elementary school, one of the things, you know, as adults, we can look at the whole screen and kind of take it all in. But a young child's mind, if you were to show them an image, they actually break it up into chunks on their own because they can't process that much. You know, that's something that we're able to do better. And, you know, as the text mentioned that you read this week, sometimes we have to sift through, but, you know, we have to, you know, planning something for graduate students is different than for 3rd graders, for example. So Anna, what did you teach in high school?
I taught English. I also did ACT prep. They had me do ESL for like 3 years. Yeah.
So just, you know, what did you do in high school? Yes, you did pretty much everything. Sounds like lots of experience. Okay.
Fun
Excellent.
time.
So go ahead.
I was going to say, not only context for the learners, but also context for the goal or the purpose. I feel like you would provide different information if you wanted them to just, like it said, a right on time aid versus actually trying to retain anything for long-term memory.
Yes, that's going to be factored in. What about context? Are there cultural factors we need to think about for context? Okay, how might that be related in here as if we're kind of crafting a little bit of a kind of an overarching definition here? Or do you have an example maybe of where, you know, where culture might fit in?
I think the best example is Morgan's question from earlier. Do they actually rush the field at soccer games?
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know if that's an Argentinian or just an American thing.
Yeah, I don't think the whole taking goalposts down like they do in American football happens so much. But yeah, maybe it's an interesting dissertation study at some point or something on that. What I was thinking, just even culturally, you know, sometimes culture might factor in. You know, there are certain colors that might be considered to be lucky
Offensive.
or are more advantageous, and even, yeah, I think sometimes international companies have to really factor this in because the color scheme works great in this country and it means one thing, but you take those same color scheme and that same sort of branding, and it doesn't really fit the cultural context there. So that's something
There's
to be.
also, especially with visual literacy, one thing to consider is the direction that text goes. So if you have an advertisement for like a laundry process, if you're in a country that is, say, Arabic speaking, you would want to have the beginning of it on the right and the end of it on the left. So the process to someone who reads left to right would look backwards.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned just the whole language issue as well. That's another thing. Yeah, there's a lot of contextual issues we have to factor in. So can this be taught? Can we teach visual literacy?
Yes.
You think so? Anybody dispute that? No, you can't. You can't teach that. Can't teach that skill.
I hope so, because I think that's what we're supposed to be learning.
Yeah, you're right there. Yeah, we are. Yeah, it is. It is a skill. It's a skill to be taught. I'm just going to add that in here. Okay, I think we hit some of the different elements here. All right, we've got a pretty good kind of working definition. You know, as our text mentioned, it's kind of hard to define. That's why for a long time nobody had done it. But what are the three? I think we've got a couple of these already. So we mentioned before that we've got encoding. That's one of the skills that we need to have here. Encoding images, we might call that creation of images. Okay, what's another one of the skills or maybe one of the main ideas here that needs to fit? I'm going to go ahead and attach this to different parts here. So we need the image creation or the encoding of images. What are a couple of the other kind of big ideas here in visual literacy?
Like creation, contextualizing, and then because I feel like, yeah, I feel like to bring in context or to bring some sort of organization to it should be one of them.
Yes. So like what you said there, bring context. Or really this is, this is going to be, I think we could almost call this can we call this maybe engaging in visual thinking? If I can spell engaging. That's kind of the really big picture one. So we've got encoding. What's it called when we process or we kind of read an image?
Interpreting or understanding.
Now we could go interpret. Okay. Understand. Maybe we could even call this decoding. Maybe a little bit in here. And so if we look at what we've got so far, let me go ahead and just connect these elements up here. So can we really do one without the other? What's the relationship between the three orange elements that we've got here? How are they related?
I mean, you've got input, output, decoding, encoding, and then contextualizing. So it's kind of like what comes in, what goes out, and then everything that's around it.
Everything. So yeah, that's a terrific summary right there. So would it be fair to say would you say that these are interrelated? I mean, certainly they're, that's pretty fair to say? Okay. So I'm going to kind of just draw these around connecting. Let's see if I can move this around outside here. Let's do our big loop. So not a perfect loop, but these, you could almost say that these are sort of the elements that all revolve around this. Now we mentioned, I think we got this in our definition beginning, it's based on theory. So what kind of theory underlies visual literacy? Or what were some of the sort of big theoretical ideas in our reading this week? What were some of the theories?
One of the things that I thought was really interesting was how much one of the texts was focusing on the idea that visual literacy is real, just establishing that it's a thing.
Yeah, I think it's
Which I
Lord
don't think
chapter
I've seen
1.
that kind of like insistence about just something, existing.
Yeah, I mean, it almost sort of begs the question, like, is there somebody out there saying this is not a real thing? Like, is this why somebody's pushing back so hard on that?
I mean, I think in a different text, it might have been Lord chapter 1 or 3. It was essentially saying that there was pushback at some point, that high academia was essentially saying, oh, the written word is the best word, and
Yeah,
that visual literacy is just for decoration. And now that we have all those decades of people saying that, and we're trying to combat that, yes, there were people saying that this wasn't real.
yeah. Well said. So if we were going to cut, we're going to kind of move into some of the theories here. We can certainly add more. So what were some of the big theories that came out in the reading about this? Once we finally established in academia that yes, this is a thing. Where there'll be no IDT 7060 if we hadn't established that across academia. What were some of the theories that came up that support visual literacy?
I think Morgan already said this, but cognitive load.
Cognitive load theory. And what's kind of the basic premise behind that?
Multimedia
Yeah, it's the
theory.
multimedia. This multimedia theory. Yeah, this leans into, you're going to read, I think you read later on some of Mayer's texts about cognitive load theory. We don't want to overload our learners' channels so they can't comprehend what's there, right?
Yeah,
That would
goes
definitely be in there.
into Isn't that the one that talks about like zone of proximal development, like meet your people where you are?
Yes.
The germane,
Information
yeah,
processing.
the germane load, where we're
Yes.
trying to
Yes. Yes. That's the one.
Okay.
Exactly. Okay. Any other theories? Anything that was more, that's a little bit further down the road in terms of the theory piece, just the idea of kind of look. What about just the idea of did you guys come across information processing theory this week? A little bit. Does
Yeah,
anyone want to chime in on that?
was talking about short-term and long-term memory and how we group things together and how it moves from short-term into long-term. And that as a designer, our focus should be the working memory.
Yes.
And again, just helping the learner make connections with the knowledge that they already have.
Yes. Yeah. Well said. So move this one around here a little bit.
I was gonna make a joke about when Anna brought up me asking the question about whether or not they charge the field in Argentina. And I was gonna say, does Taylor Swift go to football games in Argentina as part of our as part of our cultural discussion?
Yeah. Well, the NFL is trying to, they've got the NFL Europe where they go play a game or two. Maybe Argentina is the next frontier. I don't know. So what about, do we get all the theory for this week? Or there were any other theories that came up?
There were a lot of like little theories, I think. I don't know if it's more of a principle than a theory. But one of them that's standing out in my mind, and this might be too in the weeds, but it reminded me of the first picture that we looked at where well, I guess actually, I don't know if this is theory, but one of the other major points was the selection, integration, and organization. And with selection, there's conscious and unconscious selection. And when we were looking at the first picture, it made me think of the unconscious selection. Think when we had pointed out that there were words at the top and at the bottom of the picture, and that when we first look at an image, we go to the borders first. And I feel like having the words there kind of forced our eyes to go there and work our way like inwards into the picture.
Okay. Yes. That would definitely fit in there. So how should we name that?
I don't remember what the specific what the specific theory was called. I just remember that it was associated with the unconscious selection.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if this is what Morgan's talking about, but is universal design a theory, or is it what would you classify that as?
That's a really good question. I think I'm going to go ahead and add that. I don't know if I necessarily call it a theory, but if we have to plan and design with the learner in mind, and universal design for learning really fits in that. Are you familiar with the framework very much?
I don't think I've gone into it too much in my other classes, but basically just making it as accessible to as many people as possible and like appealing to as many learners as you can. Kind of like sorry, it's so late. I'm so tired. User-centered. Would you say it's the same as user-centered design, or is that a different thing?
I think UDL is maybe a little bit more focused on, like I'll give you a quick for example of UDL. If you have an image and you've got alt text on that image, so it's for your, if you've got, let's say you teach in high school and you've got a student who's visually impaired, they may not be able to actually read that image, but an example of UDL might be to, put the alt text in there so when they moused over, the screen reader came to it and say, picture of instructor or whatever it is. I think user-centered design is a little bit different. I think they're both accessibility focused though. Let's see, UDL is accessible for all. What about, let's see, there's one other one I thought we might add here. What about dual coding theory? Where does that kind of fit into what we have
We
in
have a
here?
visual input and we have verbal input. And visual input, of course, we might have images. Verbal, we're talking maybe auditory, auditory
Auditory.
information. And it plays into multimedia theory and also cognitive load theory on how we present information to the learner. You have redundancy theory or principle will come up in that
Yes.
also.
Or the picture superiority.
Yeah.
I know that we can encode that really quickly.
Yeah, we like pictures, don't we? Pictures are just generally easier. Yeah. So I'm also going to just connect these as another kind of circle in our diagram, and we're going to wrap up this part of our discussion here just to talk about what does this mean, or what do these things mean? You know, the theory, and also UDL, which I think we could probably debate: is this a theory or not, or what exactly is UDL in this context? What does this mean for us as designers, or how do we go about applying these things? Move some of these around. We might come up with more than 4 because we're having some pretty good discussion tonight. Really appreciate your input tonight. So what are maybe some guiding principles we need to keep in mind as we design? We've looked at the theory, we've looked at some of the premises here.
Maybe with dual coding theory, looking at the balance of visual and verbal elements and trying not to overload on either side.
Okay. Let's see, balance of elements. Okay.
I thought it was kind of cool that the reading was talking about not to dismiss text, even though that we're focused on visuals, that typography is a type of visual, and
Yes, it
also
is.
that text can be very supportive in this process.
Okay, Ken. Yeah, it's sort of the often overlooked element of visual literacy is text, that's still a visual. Okay, excellent. When we think of is it more about the what, or is it more about the who?
I feel like you have to determine your who before you can determine your what, though.
Yes.
You have to know who your audience is for, or who your audience is, what it's for, and then decide what would help them the most to learn, actually.
Yes. Yeah, we definitely got to keep the audience in purpose. So how would some of those answer that? Is it the who? Is it the who first, or is it the what first as visual designers?
I mean, I feel like just from a rhetorical perspective, you have to know who your audience is and what your subject is before you can figure out why you're why you're creating something. And so the overall what the purpose only comes after you know who the audience is. But you do have to know what you're talking about.
You do. So you'd say the purpose before the audience.
No, I would say the audience before the
So
purpose.
audience before the purpose. Okay. So could we agree to say audience first and purpose second? Does anybody push back on that?
I agree with that.
You agree? Yeah, feel free to push back. That's why we had this discussion. Since
Can we do what, who, what?
what, who, what?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I like that. We'll make a quick adjustment here. So what, who, what?
Because I feel like that you have to know the subject as well. Like you have to
Yeah.
have those two parts of it, and then purpose is kind of what connects it.
Yeah. And what's our ultimate goal as instructional designers in terms of visual design? what are we trying? Maybe root back into the theory a little bit. This has kind of been an undercurrent and a thread in our discussion a little bit tonight. What's our ultimate goal for our image design or our visual design?
I think getting the information across that we want to get to the audience.
Okay, so we could say communicate.
Having multiple avenues. Oh, sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
I was gonna say having multiple avenues and multiple visual and audio points in their mental recall in order for them to, well, actually be able to recall.
Okay, and where in their memory do we want their learning to end up?
Long term.
Okay, we want it in long term, and it's interesting. But what does our text say about the memory? Does our text just say like aim for the long term, or the different text? There was a lot of reading this week, admittedly.
Designers want to shoot for working memory.
Yeah, working memory. Yeah, so we might say, can we say maybe shoot for working memory?
And then shoot for working memory, maybe. I still usually follow the keep an episodic buffer longer, or
Yes.
try to at least hold a concept in front of them for that 30 seconds. Yeah, keep it in the buffer. Just a little longer.
I'm gonna say keep it in the buffer. I'm gonna say e-buffer. We'll know what that means, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But true. And then we're definitely aiming for we want it to end up in long-term memory.
Can we talk about that for a quick second?
Yes,
I know
yes.
this might be running a little bit longer than what you
No.
wanted, but
No, it's good. It's good. This
I didn't
is
quite catch
exactly what I was
that.
hoping for. So
I mean, I caught it in the reading, but I didn't quite like grasp it. So if we could chat about that for a minute, that would be great.
okay, you're talking about the long-term memory,
The buffer.
the buffer. Yeah, the buffer is kind of a little bit of an esoteric concept. It's like what is that? I can understand like the working memory, that's I think we can hold 5 to 9 things. What is that? I think that's just, it's almost, I guess if I was going to use almost like a cooking analogy, I would say that this is, maybe it's almost like a marination of just like kind of spending some time soaking in that before it moves on. And I think this also goes into the idea of rehearsal. And rehearsal is just, can you give me an example? Can you connect this to something that you already know? I mean, one thing that's great about when we were discussing the Argentine World Cup victory was, we were pulling in examples from American football and from, other experiences in sports. Those are those attachments. I think those might be some good examples of just that sort of marination that happens in the episodic buffer. But it is kind of a tricky concept to understand.
Morgan, I would say that I actually, fortunately, I also had to teach teachers to do these things. And as I used to tell them, if working memory is you being in a classroom, your episodic buffer would be you being in a dark room. And that is where your student's light bulb moment happens. You will know when it has sunk in because you will be in the dark room, and then a light bulb will go off. They will have that aha, that makes sense from whatever connection, analogy, picture, song, any type of mnemonic that I had to give them to get them there, but they got there.
Yeah, that's a really good summary. That's a good way to put it. I like the dark room and light bulb analogy there too. The light bulb. Oh yeah, now I get it. I know what that is. Yeah, that's a great example. Well, did you have a chance to look at the pandemic infographic or the pandemic article? I think it was optional this week.
I didn't get that far in the reading.
Didn't get that
I
far.
think it's in that list. No.
We try to kind of keep these to an hour, so I wish we had more time, and I do want to give you a chance to ask some questions about the assignment, just about the course. So I mentioned our focus has got to be on our learners, and there's that debate: is it the learning or is it the learner? And probably yes. We need to design with care. Third graders can't do the same thing that high school kids can do, that graduate students can do, right? I mentioned about UDL and making our images or our message accessible for all is a real key principle too, and just being intentional. I think the words in that first image were really powerful. You know, the Argentine team is literally on top of the world. That's a good fit in there. This is the infographic, and I want to spend just about 2 minutes on this because I really want to be mindful of your time. If you didn't have a chance to see this, this is from 2020, and I want to show you the bottom of this first. What they did is they've got basically the same information down here as a chart. Visually engaging. Yes, it's text. Yes, text is a visual, but you know, yawn, not really great. So what do you notice about, and this is just to give you a little bit of context. I know some of you mentioned, you know, this was optional, so if you didn't get there, it's okay. But what do you notice about the design decisions at the top part of this? It's the history of pandemics throughout time. I'm gonna change my screen resolution a little bit so maybe we can make this fit a little bit better. What do you think about the design? What do you notice, or what strikes you about the design decisions that the designer made here?
It looks like the time is coming at us, right? So yeah. So like, I would say if I were looking at this, it would put more importance, more significance on what's closer, because it might be more relevant to your own life and like what, or your memory and like recent history rather than like further away on the timeline.
Okay, yeah, it definitely is coming toward us. Do you think that it would have the same impact if it was sideways, like if it started, you know, back with the Antonine plague and the plague of Justinian on the left hand side and kind of gone left to right?
There's kind of a threat to it because it's like they're coming at you.
Yeah, like whoa, okay, stop, right? Yeah, I thought it was interesting too about this, you know, I guess we could call these puffballs for lack of a better term. I
I know
think they
they're
almost
supposed to look like viruses, but they look like tribbles from Star Trek.
yes, they do. I was hoping that somebody was going to say that, and you were going to make me not feel so old because that's, you know, that's kind of classic Star Trek here, and I think they look more and more threatening too. Like, you know, these are kind of, hey, those are kind of calm. You know, those are kind of nice viruses from the past, but these just look scary. They look scarier. But I think even just we're not going to spend very much time because I want to go on and talk about your assignments and give you a chance to ask some questions, but the linearity, if I can use that word, and just that it's coming at us and it's really looked threatening, really I think fits very well. And even the text that they've got in here, you know, red certainly is more threatening than some of the other colors that they've got in our cultural context here. Yeah, if you have time, you might go back and take a look at it. It's really just an interesting design for information. I think I like what was saying. You know, yeah, it's really coming at us. You know, like you want to just, you know, put up the stop sign or say we've had enough. You know, there's too much going on here.
Why does
I
the
do-
COVID one look like that? Does it explain why? Is it because it's like not done yet?
Yeah, I think it's referencing down here that it's ongoing, and that's
Oh,
so
it's
it's
on.
not.
Okay.
And this is I think 2020 or maybe 2021. Well, I guess it's 2020, 2023. So this is even a little bit dated. A little bit behind here, but yeah, it's not even fully formed. I guess another design element here, you see that it's a little bit formed at the bottom more so than as it goes up to the top. So maybe it's kind of continuing, or we're not done yet. You know, hopefully we are done with the pandemic, in large part. But yeah, some interesting things here. So a couple things we have coming up. We've got our second part of our discussion post. You had the first one that's to kind of get to know you. Then your second one is to focus on an image that relates to equity. And I think several people have already posted in that. Do anybody have any questions about the second discussion post this week or what that entails?
I just wanted to check. That is a found image, right? It's not we create one.
Yes,
Okay.
you are correct. And you know, something else too, and I want to go back to the Argentine images. You know, Anna, you're fluent in Spanish, but and I'm really not. But I really intentionally picked one that I thought that maybe we couldn't read because although words are important, I really wanted us to focus on the image. Your image itself doesn't actually have to say equity in it. It could also kind of lean real hard into that metaphoric side. You know, some people have already posted, and there's nothing wrong with them. It doesn't have to be an image. It doesn't have to be an image that actually says the word equity on it. You know, what does equity mean to you? You know, is it school equity? Is it equity in a different context? It's very open-ended for what that could be. So does anybody have any other questions about the discussion post there? I know we're running up on 9 o'clock, and I do, as I mentioned, I do want to be respectful of our time for tonight. I do appreciate you being here tonight. I do want to turn ahead to the first assignment that's due at the end of week 2. That's your visual design project here. I may just pull it up, so maybe we can kind of throw some questions up there if you have them. Make this larger again so it's actually visible for us. In this assignment, there's 2 parts. You're going to do an initial critique, and you're going to be using AI, generative AI, to create an image for an instructional context. Does everybody know what instructional context means, or do you need a couple examples? Or okay. Anna, do you have
I was like, one example would not hurt. Please.
One example? Okay, I actually have 2, but I'll give you because I'm a school teacher by trade. So maybe instructional context could be I'm teaching my kids about the solar system. And maybe my first prompt, I say, you know, I need a picture that has all the planets and even include Pluto, even though it's not really a planet anymore. Or at least the science would suggest that. Maybe the first one that I get, it doesn't show me any of the moons around Saturn. This is kind of a ridiculous example. You'll find that I like ridiculous examples as well. So maybe the second time I say, you know, Adobe Firefly, craft me an image of the solar system for teaching 5th graders about this that distinctly shows all of the moons of Saturn. You know, Bing, it throws the image up there. And then maybe I still don't like that. Maybe it conveniently left out our own moon. So maybe I say, and, you know, don't forget our moon this time. You know, solar system image, all the moons. Make sure you don't forget our moon. Can I tell you a funny story about this when I was playing around with this, getting ready for this class? Real quick. I like funny stories too. I'm a social studies teacher by trade. So I tried a ridiculous prompt this week. I tried Darth Vader fly fishing with Han Solo, just because I kind of want to see what it come up with. So you'll never guess who it put in the picture besides Han Solo and Darth Vader. Luke Skywalker showed up in one of the images. And so I had to clarify my prompt to say, you know, Darth Vader and Han Solo fly fishing without an image of Luke Skywalker. And I still have no idea why it generated that. But another example that I played around, I told you I'd give you 2 real quick. I tried one for EMTs. I'm doing an EMT training on being a first responder for head injuries. And so it pulled up some very interesting images there. In terms of the tools, I tried the Get MG AI. You can also use this thing called Tool Hunter if you want to try something different. I like Adobe Firefly the best. That's not to say you have to use that one, but it has a lot of really easy to use image tools in there. And then you're going to look at some design elements and you're going to do a little bit of critique. And one of the expectations for this paper is that you're going to reference things we've talked about in class, and also big ideas. You'd reference the theory and reference some of the things that we're reading in class. You can see there's some questions that you want to include in your critique. The answers to them is right in the APA 7 paper. Just a quick comment about APA 7. I know every professor is different. My expectations for APA 7 are just that there's a title page, your text, and then your reference page. You don't need an abstract. Are any of you dissertation? Are any of you in the doctoral program? Nobody? Okay. Sometimes that's something that comes up like, oh, do I need an abstract? No, you don't. Then you're going to do a redesign, and this is where you're going to design 2 new visuals by manipulating the one design element that you mentioned in each visual, and then in 1 to 2 pages. It's usually about a page per. What were the new prompts you attempted? You know, 5th grade solar system units. This time, make sure the moons show up. What did you change in the prompt? And then how does that impact the image's original meaning? So no run up on 9 o'clock. Does that make sense? Or do you have, what sort of questions or clarifications can I try to, could we discuss here?
So for this, you have 2 new visuals. Are those just iterations of the same original like prompt? You're just
Yes.
redoing it? Okay, okay.
Yeah. That's correct. And something that I just, in my mind, I thought, well, what we're looking for here is you're going to use AI for, this is really probably the AI heaviest assignment in terms of the image generation. Even your first image will be AI generated. And then also your iterative images beyond that first one will also be AI generated. Okay. Right. Any other questions? It's not everything. I know it's kind of a lot. I really appreciate the rich discussion we had tonight, guys. I'm really grateful for that. And just, as I mentioned at the outset, I love this class when I was taking it through my doctoral program. I think it's a lot of fun. We're going to try out something later in the term, something called Assembler, where you get to work in augmented reality, which is, there's a little bit of a learning curve. I think you're really going to enjoy that. And the infographic assignment is pretty engaging as well. So if there aren't any other questions, I'm going to go ahead and pause our recording and